This video is all about the basics of the periodic table. The first thing that I want you to recognize here on this periodic table is this staircase. Hopefully you can see this here. Let's see. So there's a staircase, hopefully you can see where I'm drawing right now. And the ones I put in your notes, I think they're not there, so make sure you start the staircase to the left of boron and just follow that all the way down until you get to between polonium and astatine, which is 84 and 85 on the periodic table. The purpose of that staircase is essentially to separate the metals from the nonmetals. And forgetting about these labels up here, what I want you to make sure and understand is that for the most part, the metals are to the left of that staircase, and then non-metals are to the right of the staircase. And if we look at some metals that you're familiar with, like copper, there's copper, and sure enough it's to the left of the staircase. There's silver, there's gold, there's platinum, those are all metals that I think you're pretty familiar with. There's iron, those are all to the left of the staircase. There is one exception to this rules of the metals to the left of the staircase, and you might want to pause the video to try to guess which one that is. Here is that exception. It's hydrogen. Hydrogen is the only exception to the left of the staircase. In fact, all of these down here also are all metals. They actually are supposed to be inserted in where this line is. So make sure that you know that those are also metals. As far as exceptions to the right side of the staircase, there really are no exceptions. A lot of these elements that hug the staircase, such as germanium, arsenic, silicon, antimony, tellurium, these are all called metalloids or semimetals. They have properties of both metals and nonmetals, and that's why they're called metalloids. There are two terms that you'll hear me use pretty often when talking about the periodic table, and those are groups and periods. The groups refer to the columns on the periodic table, so that's group 2. In fact, a lot of times you'll see on periodic tables that'll be labeled as 2A. So the main parts of the periodic table are always labeled with this letter A. Those are the ones that we're going to be looking at most often, and those are the ones I'm going to be referring to. This periodic table has a different kind of numbering where it numbers from 1 to 18 on the right hand side. Typically, these metals that are right here, these are called transition metals, and we really won't be using those very often in chemistry. And so a lot of times they'll be given a B designation versus the A designation that we'll be using. So again, the groups are going to be the columns on the periodic table, and periods are the rows on the periodic table. So these rows going across are called periods. There are 4 groups that I need you to memorize the names of. The first one is this one right here. On some periodic tables it's labeled as 1A. On this one it's just labeled as 1. Group 1A are called the alkali metals. Group 2A are called alkaline earth metals. So it's very closely named after group 1A, so be careful about that. But it does end in INE, and then earth metals. The last two groups that I need you to be aware of are groups 7A and 8A on this periodic table. 7A is right there and 8A is right there. 7A is labeled as 17, but that's the old school numbering that we're not going to be using. And then group 8A is labeled as 18. And again, we're going to be using this designation of 8A instead. Now let's get to the names. 7A are called the halogens, and group 8A are called the noble gases. So these are all gases, and the reason for this term noble is because they have a very, very favorable electron configuration. They have a really perfect number of electrons. There's something really magical in chemistry about having 2 electrons, 10, 18, 36, 54, and 86 electrons, and we'll get to why that's kind of a magical number later on in a different chapter. So those are the 4 groups that you need to know about: alkali, alkaline, halogen, and noble gases. Now let's get to some properties of metals. There are 3 main properties of metals that I want you to know. The first one is they are very efficient in conducting electricity. The second one is that they are malleable. And if you don't know this term malleable, all that means is that you can hammer it into shapes. And then the third property of metals that we see often are that they are shiny. There are 2 properties of nonmetals that I want you to know about. The first one is that many nonmetals are brittle. The second property is that many are gases at room temperature. These are really the only ones that I want you to know about nonmetals.